Shalom, welcome to Rob on the Rock. I'm Rob Van Hoff, and for this week's Torah portion, which is called Toldot, we're going to look at this section from the Dead Sea Scrolls. It is a section from Genesis 26, and as you can see here, it is in Paleo-Hebrew. It's a tiny little leather fragment that is rather hard to read, so we're going to make use of the digital photography that we see here that uses infrared lighting to really help those letters be differentiated from the leather. So that's why we're looking at this black and white picture, but as you can see, it's the same text. And we'll look at the English here. So it's has a section here that stretches from verse 21 all the way to 27. And what I have in bold here is what we'll see in Hebrew. They dug another, we'll see that word, another well. They did not quarrel. And it's enough that we're pretty sure this is what it is. It can't be any other part of the Bible, right? Because there's no other part of the scriptures that has these particular phrases. From there, he went up to Beer-sheva. Now it's just the Bear that we see. Abraham, your father, we'll see only the mem of Abraham, but we'll see the full fear not. The name of Adonai, we're going to see, and he pitched. We'll see a little bit of that. And then finally, advisor and Fikol, the commander of his army. So we're just going to see a little bit of here. Again, we don't know if this was originally an entire scroll of Genesis or whether this is only a small section of Genesis in its original writing. And it's dated to the Hasmonean era. So this is old. This is a very old fragment of Genesis 26. Well, so let's take a look here, and we're going to be paying attention to the Hebrew letters that we're able to discern. And what we see here up in the upper left is part of a yod, so it's going to look like that, and then a chet, and then a pei, and then a resh. Now, in the Masoretic text, we would see a vav before this and after it. And it's vayachperu, and they dug. And they dug. If we were to write it in Hebrew, it would look like this. Vav, yod, chet, pei, resh, vav. Like that. Vayachperu. And they dug. But what we see here is only a partial letter of the yod right there. The chet, the pei, and the resh. We see a little bit more in the next line. We see another chet here. Another resh. And then we see a yod and a tav. Notice we have the word dividers used, which is all these little dots between the words. You can kind of look ahead and just see them. So I'm going to erase those, but it's, again, in that older style. That was common. And then we see here Vav, Lamed, and then another Vav, and then an Aleph, which is going to be kind of strange. Because in Hebrew, this is, well, what we don't see here is what we presume to be an Aleph, which looks like that. And this is the word Acharit, Aleph, Chet, Resh, Yod, Tav, and then this is Velo, spelled with an Aleph, spelled with a Vav here. Normally in Lo, it's just Lamed, Aleph, but here we have an added Vav, and also the Hebrew in the Masoretic text here, instead of Acharit, has Acheret, Aleph, Chet, Resh, Tav, with what we call a seglet like this, but the letter Yod here is also added. So there's two letters in this line that are not part of the Masoretic tradition. And that is a curious thing. We don't know why that is, but it doesn't affect the meaning at all. And this is where it says they dug another well. Acheret is the word in the Masoretic text. Acharit is the word used here. And it says they did not dispute, or did they not quarrel? Velo, and we see a resh here for the beginning of the word quarrel. So just to review then, notice we look at the letters we've already learned here. We've seen the letter chet here and here. We've seen a resh here, here, and here. We've seen an aleph here, and there's a partial one up there. We've seen a yod here, and a tav, and a vav, another vav, and a lamed, which is somewhat broken. So let's, and a letter pei, of course, here. So we'll come back through and we'll look at the whole alphabet as we go. One of the best lines is this very next line here that's visible to us. It's vav, yod, and then this is an ayin. Now notice the ayin. Let me erase that so you can kind of see. I wonder if I can zoom in a little bit on it. It looks kind of like that. Now remember, in the ancient script, an ayin would have been almost a perfect zero, perfect circle. But here, it's more taking a shape like that, and then a lamed. And so in Hebrew of our block script, we would say vav, yod, ayin, lamed, like that, vaya'al, which means, and he went up, and he went up. So vaya'al, misham, he went up from there. So here we have a mem. Notice a mem. Both these are mems with a double little hatch like that. And then this is a sheen. So again, in our Masoretic style of Hebrew, we would put mem, shin, and then a mem sofit. Misham. And he went up from there. And we would, if we wanted to vocalize it, sham, like that. From there. And misham is the word min, from, plus the word sham, meaning there. So we can put those together, and it ends up leaving a little dagesh in the shin, which is the assimilated letter nun from the preposition min. Misham, vaya'al misham, and he went up from there. And then we have the word ber from Beersheba. So here's a bet, here's an aleph, and then a resh. Notice the difference. And so in Hebrew, today we would say bet, aleph, resh, like that. Notice this difference here between the bet and the resh. So there's our resh, there's our bet. They both have this kind of triangular top, but the bet curves down and to the left quite a bit, whereas the resh just has that vertical line to it. Okay, continuing on here. Now, this is the letter mem, which is the last letter of the name Avraham. So what would this name Avraham look like? Well, we know our aleph looks like that. Our bet looks like that. Our resh looks like that. And our hey looks like that. And then our mem. Something like that. My last little Avraham. So that's aleph, bet, resh, hey, mem sofit. Now remember, this is way back where the Paleo-Hebrew script is being used, and there is no sofit forms. So a mem is a mem, just like we see with the word misham, right? Mem, mem. Whereas in Hebrew today, we would, the initial mem, we would do a letter that looks like that, and for the final, like that. But not here. With the Paleo-Hebrew, there are no final forms. So back to our line here. So this is the end of our Avraham. Then we have a word divider. And then it says aleph, beit, yod, and then a kaf. So this is aleph, bet, yod, kaf, Avraham avika. Abraham, your father. So this is the Lord speaking to Isaac right here. Avraham avika. And then we have the beginning where it says, do not be afraid. Another aleph, lamed, al. So that's just aleph, lamed. And then we have what we see here. It's a tav. It's kind of hard to see. The tav has a broken line here, and then a yod, and then a resh, al-tira, and there's going to have to be another aleph here that we can't fully see. Al-tira. That means do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Al-tira. Whenever the Bible says do not be afraid, it's because in the flesh there is some sort of purpose or reason to feel afraid. Here we go. Here's our tetragrammaton right here. Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. So Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. Here's a place that we don't see the tetragrammaton getting any special treatment because it is in the same script as the rest of the text. Whereas in later Qumran texts, we see that block Hebrew, or what we call the Aramaic script, used except for the tetragrammaton or names like Elohim or Adonai. So you get the point. One other thing where we do have here Vav, Yod, and this the tet is really hard to see. It looks like it might be this, but it's so faded that it's hard to see. But we have that beginning of that verb here, which means to stretch out, and it's where it says pitched here. Pitched. But you pitch a tent. It uses the word root nun tet hey to pitch or to stretch out. So you get the overall point here. What I want to do is go and look at and kind of build, like we've done before in other videos, an aleph bet modeled off of this manuscript. So our first letter would be aleph. So here's our aleph. And what I want to do is find alephs on this manuscript. Well, we know that there is one right here. Velo, for the word lo. And we see one right here for bear. And we see one here for al. And avika, right, your father. So there's good 4 alephs. And let's just look at each one. We've seen this in other scripts. It's almost like a letter F, but it has a little bit of top to it. Over here, here's another one. And then finally here. Now it's so close to the letter Tav because letter Tav is just going to be the X like we see right here. So the difference between an aleph and a Tav is aleph, Tav, very close to each other. So in any case, now let's go over and we'll zoom back out and build our alphabet here. So our aleph looks like this, and we're going to go something like that. There's our aleph. Now our letter bet. We've seen a bet here. We've seen one for bear right there. That one's nice and bold. For avicha, your father, we see another one here. So there's 2 good solid bets. Probably more like an angle. So if I'm going to write that, I'm going to do this. There's our bet. There are no gimels, no dalets, but hays, we do have some hays. For example, we have the hay in the Tetragrammaton, we have two, Yod, He, Vav, He. We have a He down here. And so that's from Me'arehu, his fikol, which means his companion. So our He is going to be this kind of looking thing. Now, I don't know whether they did these strokes first and then that stroke going the other way. But here's our block He, and then we're just going to do this. He. Now Vav, we have quite a few Vavs. If we go back up, we have a Vav here, a Vav here. We have a Vav here. It's like an S with a stick. Yod, He, Vav, He right down here. And another one here. Now that one makes me think that I maybe it even had a back hook like that. Here's another one. So our Vav is going to be some sort of S with like a little leg sticking out of it. Zion, no Zions, but a Het, yes. We saw a Het here, partial, and one up here. Now the one up here looks like he almost maybe had made it like what we think of a backwards B, but it's a Het. And I'm just going to go with the traditional way of doing it is kind of like that. A Tet we did see right over here where I'm suspicious that that's the way it was made. Let me do that again. Like that. Kind of like a little spiral. Tet. Yod. Yeah, we've seen quite a few. Yod here for Yod He Vav He. Avicha. Here's a Yod. Vaya'al, right? And he went up. There's a Yod. Acharit. We saw a Yod. So our Yod is basically like that. Erase these. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf. Kaf. Remember, no Sophite letters, but we did see a Kaf here. And for Fikol, the name Fikol. So we have at least two Kafs. Lamed, we saw a few Lameds. We saw a Lamed at the end of Fikol right here. To Al-Tira, right, like that. And Vaya'al, and he went up. And Velo, there's one right here. So we see at least four Lameds. So let me do better than that. There's our Lamed. These Lameds look like that. Mem. We've seen a Mem here and here. Mem here. And was there another Mem? Well, there's at least three then that we can point out. So a Mem looks like this. I can do maybe a little better than that. Mem. Noon, I don't remember, I don't think there's a noon on this particular manuscript. Samek, no. Ayin, yes, we had at least one ayin, Vaya'al, this guy right there. So while we would say ayin like this, now let me do a little better than that. It's going to be something like that. Ayin, pay. Yeah, we saw two pays. We see a pay right here for Fikol and a pay up here for Chafar, the verb to dig a well. I think that might be it. So it's something like that. Tadi, no. Kuf, no. Reish, yes. Reish, we've seen a few. Remember, Al-Tira, there's a Reish. For Beersheva, there's a Reish. For the verb, they did not quarrel, is a Reish. And even Vayachpuru, there's a Reish here. There's a Reish here for Acharit. So I don't know if I got them all, but you could see here, quite a good sampling of resh. Sheen. Now I know we had at least the one sheen with misham right here. Misham, from there. And I think that's enough. Even if we only have one, we can at least say there. And then our last tav, we can find a few tavs here. See if we can find them again here. Acharit, right there. Vayal Misham, Beersheva, your father. Al Tirah. This one looks like it's a little broken because it's next to the yod. So, but there's a tav there, and that might be the only two. So there we go. Oops. So if I bring these front and center, we can look at them again. So Aleph. There we go. Looks like that. Bet, check. No gimel, no dalet, but we do have a hey or two, a few vavs. No zions, but chet. We had two chets. Tet, one tet that's kind of hard to see, so I'm guessing on that one. Plenty of yods. We have at least two kafs. We have a handful of lameds and mems. There's no noons. Ayin, though, we do have only one. No samics, but we do have a couple pays. No kofs, but we do have a resh, handful of resh. I think there were 4. And then we have a sheen and a few tavs. So there you go. So this is an example of a Hasmonean era. So that's the time of the Maccabees. A copy of a fragment of Genesis. This is from Genesis 26. And again, we don't know whether this was an entire scroll of Genesis or if it was just a small piece of leather that just had a few chapters of Genesis. Sadly, it's lost to us, that knowledge, but we can still know by looking at this text, we can compare it with Hebrew texts from other times, and we can be confident that it does in fact reflect this passage, Genesis 26, 1 through 27. And the two places where we had the spellings that varied from the Masoretic text was just a different way of spelling another and a different way of spelling not. And in the case of this Paleo-Hebrew manuscript, there was an extra letter, acharit, an extra yod for the word another, or not, I shouldn't say extra, just an additional letter that was the letter yod that's not necessary, and then a letter vav also that's not necessary. So the letters that we see here that differentiate it from the Masoretic text do not change the meaning, but they reflect a spelling that is not actually necessary to convey that meaning. So it's inconsequential in terms of meaning. From what we can see from this manuscript here, the story would have been exactly the same whether you read it from this and understood it from this manuscript or from the Masoretic text from 1,000 years later. Shalom.